my claim is, during the Civil War, at times the soldiers had little food to survive on, but made the most of it by using recipes. Also, if you wanted to eat in the Civil War, you'd have to know how to make it or where to get the food. Or else, in 14 days, you would not survive. Because, truthfully, in 14 days, you would die of starvation. Especially if you didn't drink water. If you didn't drink water for 3 days, goodbye. What? Ah! That could have hit the wall. As you can tell, or not exactly, but this is hardtack. I made it like 2 days ago. And my sister's having a really fun time throwing it at me. It doesn't taste that. I'm sorry.
This is so going into your teacher.
I got one. This can really damage your wall and teeth, and I don't know how soldiers ate it. Well, I do know that they either put it in tea.
Last one.
No.
Ah.
Tea or anything hot to disintegrate it or make it soft. Also, they would crack it with their bottom of the rifles or shotguns just to soften it or make it into little pieces. These are a bit on the softer side. Not exactly. As I said before, the Confederacy and Union soldiers, the hungry soldiers, of course, on both sides, have found many ways to eat the hardtack. They dipped it in water, coffee, tea. They practice this to help soften the hardtack so it doesn't break the soldiers' teeth. Like almost the wall broke. Other soldiers also ate soft, unsoftened hardtack, but after beating it basically with the end of their rifle, I don't think the rifle would be pretty after breaking them. During the Civil War, the Civil War soldiers were also given rice, potatoes, onions, molasses, and non-perishable or slow-to-perish items. During the Civil War, the Civil War soldiers were also given rice, potatoes, onions, molasses, and non-perishable or slow-to-perish items. The soldiers were often given 3-day rations before a march or battle. They cooked their own raw food and then had to carry it with them everywhere. When the enemy territory, soldiers frequently helped themselves to chickens, fruit, vegetables, and other items from local farms and households. When times were thin, soldiers sometimes resorted to eating their own horses and mules. Think about eating a horse. I would not. I like them. They're gentle creatures. Also, in extreme desperation, they ate rats. That's not exactly sounding that appetizing now, does it? Beef jerky. It was the most popular demand of its closest to authenticness in ingredients and technique. To make this, you need 1 to 1/4 pound of meat. Not exactly that much, but still a lot. And also 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of seasoning salt, too much salt. Also garlic salt, and half of soy sauce. I did not know that before I looked this up, beef jerky, I did not know that it required soy sauce. Some of the Civil War food. Civil War soldiers never had the luxury of standing in the mess line waiting for army cooks to dish out chow, or food. Of course, the generals and other officials had luxury of cook, but the vast majority of soldiers gathered in small groups each evening to prepare their food. They called these groups messes, and referred to other groups as messmates. Messmates took turns watching the meals they cooked in order, so it won't burn and so it could taste well. Food in the Civil War was cooked over an open fire in a cast iron skillet, or kettle, or occasionally on a splint. Which you should definitely have a watcher over that, or else it will burn. Trust me, I tried it before. If they had time, soldiers tried to devise ways of making their dull diet a little more varied, occasionally catching wild game or picking wild berries. They probably got sick by eating the wild berries, or possibly the game. The food supply in the Civil War, the people who took care of the food was called quartermasters and had the most complex task. Vast tonnages of food and other supplies had to be constantly acquired, secured, and moved in highly organized manner across often impossible terrain under the most catastrophic and harrow of conditions. As for the luxury of coffee, much like today, the men on both sides had their love for coffee. The Union was fortunate to have a steady supply of coffee beans, although they were raw and green. Not exactly as green like vomiting or sick, but like not neon either. Just green. Like a dark green. No, actually that's like vomiting. Oh well. The Confederacy wasn't so lucky because blockades impeded its flow of equipment and arms as well as food. Basically, if you were in the Confederacy, you would probably not survive for 14 days. If you did at least get food in that 14 days. Now, on the Confederacy side of food, which has a lot of storages of food, eggs were really scarce and sometimes sold for $20 a dozen. That's a lot. Just for eggs. 12 of them. Like, there's 12 eggs. How would you divide it for 20? Makes no sense. Probably $12 for 12 eggs sounds perfectly fine. Not the 20 for a dozen eggs. But also, as a bright side, the Confederacy grew peanuts before the Civil War. At the time, Southerners fed the peanuts to, let's say, hogs, cows, shipped the peanuts to other countries. During the Civil War, food shortages forced the soldiers to depend on peanuts. I wonder how we started eating peanuts. There. Which also, the peanuts were plentiful. Cooks put peanuts in candies and desserts. I think they also put them in candles one time. Also, the Confederate soldiers made bad tasting food taste a little bit better. They flavored tasteless vegetables and rice soups with beef. That's not exactly that bad, but what if you're eating all that beef? What happens? As for dessert sometimes, sweet potatoes were a treat for the Confederate soldiers. And when other sweet food was available, there were places of sweet potatoes. They would place the sweet potatoes in basically the coals of the campfire, or they would mash it to make pudding or pies. Imagine sweet potatoes and pies, or pudding, as a matter of fact. Have you guys even tried sweet potato pudding? I have not. This is a southern dish, as there are not many swamps in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, which is kind of weird. Also, you should need some green cabbage, stewed tomatoes, salted pork, salt, too much salt for me, pepper, seasoning ingredients, pepper, onion, and garlic to make this. That's still a lot of ingredients. But actually, they found ways to get it. Also, this can be served with fried cornbread or hush puppies, which basically is mashed bread somewhat. Sorry. Another recipe is scrap stock stew. You would use 8 to 10 cups of minuscule vegetables, or scraps of every type of vegetable that you had that was left. 1 whole head of garlic, preferably unpeeled, of course, because with the peels it wouldn't exactly taste good. Trust me, I tried it before. 1 onion. Usually many onion scraps were used earlier. If they were, then you don't have to use that much. Water to cover. Probably to cover up the odor, because it may have been nasty. Probably already decomposing. And also 1 teaspoon of salt per quart of water used for this meal. Now you may think that there's probably not much water in there, but trust me, to make soup, there's a lot. And also, do not, whatever you do, if you actually try making this, do not use scraps from cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and similar vegetables, as they impact a strong, nasty taste when cooked for a long time. If you do put those in, farewell. Not farewell, but it'll be hard for you to eat it, let alone smell it. The next thing is beer, which is kind of weird, because this has nothing to do with beer. Basically, the cheap small beer that they usually somehow make is, you basically had to use 12 quarts of cold water, half a strong hopping of tea, basically strong tea, that's a lot of tea, and a pint and a half of molasses. Molasses is a type of sugar. Why would it be in a beer or some sort? You then have to mix it together well and bottle it immediately, which is kind of weird because it's not even beer. And also, if the weather is warm the next day, the bottle will be ready. But how is that beer? Like, the whole time I searched on that, I'm like, that's not beer at all. It's just tea with a lot of sugar. In conclusion, during the Civil War, the soldiers had little to eat and survive on, but they made the most of it by using modified recipes. During the Civil War, at times the soldiers had little to survive on, but